The idea of trading Anthony Davis, your 3 to 4 year window to contend for a championship, poof, forget about it.
They should have traded Anthony Davis this summer, and they should trade him now. Every day that goes by, you get closer to the end of Anthony Davis's contract. He's already in his early to mid-30s. He already has a bunch of injury issues. They have to prioritize Cooper Flagg.
I could already imagine the comment section roasting me for this becoming a Dallas Mavericks Anthony Davis channel, but there's been a lot of moving parts in this situation, and it just keeps getting crazier and crazier. We need to talk about something that's been flying under the radar while everyone's been focused on the Mavericks being trashed this season. Because a few days ago, we dropped a video about Dallas potentially trading Anthony Davis and blowing up the entire roster, right? But in the last 48 hours, some absolutely insane details have come out that make this story so much worse than we initially thought. I'm talking about Nico Harrison trying to force Anthony Davis back on the court, even though the medical staff was literally warning him that AD could tear his Achilles. I'm talking about the Lakers secretly shopping Anthony Davis 2 months before the Luka Doncic trade even happened. And I'm talking about a double standard in Dallas that's so messed up that it's really shocking. This isn't just a bad trade anymore. This is organizational negligence. This is medical malpractice. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand why Nico Harrison getting fired wasn't just necessary. It was about 9 months too late. But before we get into all of that, we are running jersey giveaways on this YouTube channel as my way of thanking you guys for our support. We're almost at 1.1 million subscribers. I'm going to be announcing multiple jersey giveaway winners a week. All you have to do is subscribe, turn on our notifications, and let me know in the comment section what jersey you want. I typically pick one of the first people to comment because that indicates that you have my notifications on. And now that we get all that out of the way, cue the intro. Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? All right, so let me start with the most disturbing part of this entire thing. According to multiple league sources who spoke to The Athletic, Anthony Davis wanted to come back for last Saturday's game against Washington. AD had been out since late October with a calf strain, 7 straight games on the sideline. And during those 7 games, the Dallas Mavericks went from bad to even worse. They were sitting at 3-8. The fire Nico chants were getting louder and louder at American Airlines Center every night. And Nico Harrison, he was really feeling that pressure. So what does he do? He starts pushing Anthony Davis to come back early. Now, you need to understand what a calf strain is. Every time I think of a calf strain, I think of Kevin Durant in the 2019 NBA Finals. He was playing with the calf strain and ultimately he ended up tearing his Achilles as a result of pushing it too hard. In that circumstance, I understand it because you're in the NBA Finals. This is where legacies are built, and KD obviously made that decision for himself because he wanted to win a 3rd championship, and I respect him a lot for doing it. I wouldn't expect it from other people. I'd understand if he also decided to sit out that game, but I really have a lot of respect for him trying to put it all out on the line just so he could win a 3rd championship, especially when there were rumors about him potentially leaving Golden State after that season. Now back to the Mavericks. The Mavericks director of health and performance, a guy named Johan Billsborough, disagreed with Anthony Davis's personal medical staff about whether it was actually safe for AD to return. And get this, according to Tim McMahon's reporting, the Mavericks medical staff explicitly warned that if Davis came back too soon from this calf strain, he could tear his Achilles tendon.
Johan Billsborough, the Mavs director of health and performance, has thrown up the caution flag. Said, oh, wait. This is a calf strain. Like, we don't need to say out loud the risk you're taking if you're rushing back from a calf strain. And Patrick Dumont, weighing in on these sort of things for the first time in the meeting, said, hey, I'm siding with Johan. I'm erring on the side of caution. Until I see, and I'm speaking to Dumont here, until Patrick Dumont sees clear, convincing medical data indicating there's no risk of aggravating a calf strain or potential catastrophic injury related to it, he's not giving AD the green light.
A torn Achilles. We're not talking about missing a few more games here. We're not talking about being a little sore. We're talking about a career-altering injury that would sideline a 32-year-old Anthony Davis for an entire year, maybe even longer, and when he would return, he clearly wouldn't be the same player ever again. And Nico Harrison was willing to roll the dice on that just to try and get a couple of wins to save his job. All right, now I know what some of you guys might be thinking.
Mike, you're being dramatic. Calf strains don't lead to Achilles tears like that.
Oh, really? Well, I gave you you the Kevin Durant example, but what about what just happened 5 months ago to a young all-star called Tyrese Halliburton, who's having the greatest playoff run we've ever seen in NBA history? This story is going to make you understand why the Mavericks medical staff was so scared. Do you guys remember the NBA Finals back in June? The Indiana Pacers versus the Oklahoma City Thunder, Game 7 in Oklahoma City. So Tyrese Halliburton had suffered a calf strain in Game 5 of that series, right? Now the Pacers did everything by the book. They ran all the tests, they checked his mobility, they made sure he could move, and Halliburton, being the competitor he is, told reporters before Game 6, "I just had to hear that it was okay. I know the risks, I know everything that comes with it." So he plays Game 6, and honestly, he looked pretty good. I mean, he was clearly limited, but he gutted through it, and the Pacers forced a Game 7. Championship on the line. You know Tyrese Halliburton's playing. There's no universe where you keep a 25-year-old All-NBA point guard out of Game 7 of the NBA Finals when he's saying he could go. Game 7 starts, and 7 minutes into the first quarter, Tyrese goes up for a play, and he goes down. And the moment he hit the floor, he starts pounding the court and crying because he knew torn Achilles, season over, career potentially altered. The Pacers would confirm he'd missed the entire 2025-26 season. And here's the thing that everybody in the NBA noticed after that happened. Donovan Mitchell tweeted out that these calf strains aren't a joke. Isaiah Thomas said that the calf strains are nothing to play with. The next thing, if not healed right, is always an Achilles tear. There's a direct connection. Calf strains can lead to Achilles tears if you don't let them heal properly. So when I tell you that the Mavericks medical staff was warning about an Achilles tear risk for Anthony Davis, they weren't being overly cautious, they weren't being soft. They had just watched Tyrese Halliburton's career get derailed 5 months earlier from the exact same situation. They knew exactly what could happen, and Nico Harrison tried to push Anthony Davis back anyway. But here's where it gets even crazier. Patrick Dumont, the team owner, had to personally step in and overrule Harrison. Dumont sided with the medical staff. He demanded to see medical data proving that Davis wasn't at risk of aggravating the injury before he'd approve of AD coming back. That's how bad it got. The owner had to tell his own GM, "No, we're not doing this." And thank God he did, because if Anthony Davis had torn his Achilles at 32 years old with his injury history, that might have been it for him as an elite player. Even Pacers general manager Kevin Pritchard said after Halliburton's injury that if I knew he was going to get hurt, I would sacrifice that game because I care for the kid so much and want him to have an incredible career. You don't get do-overs with Achilles tears, guys. You just don't. Now here's where the story takes another turn, because while all this is going down with Anthony Davis and his calf strain, we're learning about how Nico Harrison treated Luka Doncic completely differently when Luka was dealing with injuries. And when you put these two situations side by side, the contrast is actually disgusting. So check this out. Tim McMahon revealed on the Howdy Partners podcast that Anthony Davis's personal medical staff is on the Mavericks payroll. The team is paying for AD's private doctors, his trainers, his whole medical team. Now on its own, that's not necessarily bad, right? AD's 32, he's got an extensive injury history, having his own people makes sense. But here's the problem. When Luka Doncic was in Dallas, he never got that same treatment. The Mavericks refused to pay for Luka's personal medical staff. And not only that, but Harrison actually started firing trainers and therapists that Luka trusted and wanted to work with. Casey Smith had been the Mavericks director of health and performance for 21 years, and Harrison fired him after the 2023 season. Then after last season, Harrison fired strength coach Jeremy Hallsopel and manual therapist Casey Spangler, all guys that Luka liked, all guys that Luka wanted to keep working with. Luka literally told an ESPN source that they got rid of everybody I like. So what did Luka do? He went out and hired his own personal staff out of his own pocket. Slovenian national team strength coach Anze Macek, physiotherapist Javier Barrio Calvo, and Real Madrid nutritionist Lucia Almendros, all out of Luka's own money. The Mavericks didn't contribute a dime. So let me get this straight. The Mavericks wouldn't pay for Luka Doncic's medical staff, a 25-year-old generational superstar in his absolute prime who had just led you to the NBA Finals. But they're paying for Anthony Davis's medical staff, a 32-year-old who's played 14 games since you traded for him. Make that make sense. And it gets worse. There were disagreements between the Mavericks medical staff and Luka's personal team about injury timelines. When Luka had his calf strain, Joanne Billsborough thought that Luka could come back in 2 to 3 weeks. Luka's team said he needed 6 weeks. Luka even believed he got the calf strain because the Mavericks rushed him back from a heel bruise. But Harrison blamed everything on Luka's conditioning. So with Luka, Harrison doesn't trust the player's medical team. He fires the trainers that Luka likes and tries to rush him back. With Anthony Davis, Harrison pays for the player's medical team, but still still tries to rush him back even when his own doctors are warning about an Achilles tear. The only thing that's consistent here is Nico Harrison being willing to risk player health to try and win games. That's the pattern. Alright, so now we need to rewind the clock here, because everything I've told you so far has been about what happened after the trade, right? But there's this whole other layer to the story about what was happening before February, and this is where things get really interesting, because it turns out the Lakers and Anthony Davis were having major problems that nobody in public knew about. If you guys remember, Anthony Davis was not really happy with Darvin Ham during the Lakers playoff series against the Denver Nuggets. So Brett Siegel from Clutch Points dropped a bombshell report revealing that the Lakers were secretly gauging trade interest in Anthony Davis back in December of 2024. That's a full 2 months before the Luka trade went down. The Lakers were already calling around the league, seeing what kind of return they could get for AD. Now, why would they do that? Why would the Lakers be shopping a guy who just played 76 games the year before and looked like he was in the best shape of his career? Well, according to multiple team sources who spoke to Clutch Points, AD wasn't always communicating with the Lakers during the offseason, and his fitness levels entering training camps were consistently described as well below average. And this wasn't just 1 year. This was a pattern that had been building. But it goes deeper than that. After the Lakers won the first ever NBA Cup in December of 2023, AD's camp started pushing back on the team. They were frustrated that Davis was playing heavy minutes without adequate front court help. AD wanted another big man. He wanted someone else who could bang in the paint and take some of the physical toll off of him. But the Lakers didn't prioritize that. Instead, they focused on developing Austin Reeves as that third star next to LeBron and AD, which clearly explains this famous LeBron James interview once the Lakers got eliminated last year.
No comment. I never say that because my guy AD said what he needed, and then he was gone the following week. So
a team source told Clutch Points that this decision to continue having Davis play heavy minutes with virtually no front court help did not sit well with his camp, creating more friction and tension leading into the 2024-25 season. So you have this situation where AD felt like the Lakers weren't supporting him properly, and the Lakers felt like AD wasn't taking care of his body and staying in shape. Both sides were getting frustrated with each other. And then what happens? When Nico Harrison and the Mavericks heard that the Lakers were gauging early trade interest in Davis for the 2025 offseason, Harrison immediately contacted Rob Pelinka. Now, Harrison and Pelinka go way back. They've always had a strong relationship dating back to Harrison's time as an executive at Nike when Pelinka was Kobe Bryant's agent. So there was already that connection there. And here's where Rob Pelinka absolutely fleeced Nico Harrison. According to reporting, Pelinka used the Mavericks' concerns about Luka's conditioning against them during the trade negotiations. The original framework apparently had Dallas getting Dalton Connect and multiple first-round picks for Luka, but Pelinka convinced Harrison that Luka's conditioning issues made him a risk, which drove down the price. So Dallas ended up with Anthony Davis, Max Christie, and 1 first-round pick. That's it. You don't have to be a genius to realize how badly Nico Harrison botched the Luka Doncic trade, and just based off of the framework of the trade and the fact that he destroyed his own leverage in this negotiation, he deserved to be fired as general manager just based off of that. Think about how crazy this is. The Lakers were already shopping Anthony Davis because they had concerns about his conditioning and his fitness levels. But when it came time to negotiate with Dallas, Pelinka turned it around and used Dallas's concerns about Luka's conditioning to get a better deal. And Harrison fell for it. The Lakers dumped a guy they were secretly trying to move anyway, and they got a generational talent in Luka Doncic. And they paid less than market value because Harrison was so obsessed with Luka's weight. Man, when you look at it like that, this is the most lopsided trade in NBA history. And it's even worse when you know all the behind the scenes stuff that was happening. I mean, the only other trade that I could think of that was this lopsided was maybe the Pau Gasol trade, but at least in the Pau Gasol trade, the Grizzlies got a throw in the form of Marc Gasol that ended up being one of their greatest players ever. So let's bring this all back to where we are right now, because understanding everything that happened with Nico Harrison, the medical staff, and the pre-trade dysfunction, it all matters for what happens next with Anthony Davis in Dallas. AD has now missed 7 straight games with this calf strain, and there's no clear timeline for when he's coming back. Patrick Dumont is being super cautious, which is absolutely the right call, but the longer Davis is out, the worse this looks for everybody. We talked the other day about how Anthony Davis's trade value has absolutely cratered, right? A Western Conference executive told Tim McMahon that at this point, I'm not sure what they can get for Anthony Davis. And that was before we knew about Harrison trying to rush him back from injury. Now that all of this has come out, you've got to imagine other teams are looking at this situation and going, yeah, we're not touching that. If you're a GM considering trading for AD, what are you thinking right now? You know he's 32 years old. You know he's missed 30 of his last 51 games with Dallas. You know he's got 3 years and $175 million left on his contract. And now you also know that the previous regime was so desperate to get him on the court that they were willing to risk a career-ending Achilles injury. Like, that's not exactly screaming, make this trade, this is who we need to win a championship. And here's what makes this even more complicated. There's reportedly still a disagreement between Davis's personal medical staff and the Mavericks medical staff about when he can safely return. AD's people think he's closer to being ready. The Mavericks doctors are being more conservative. Dumont is siding with the Mavericks doctors, which again, that's the right move. But it creates this weird dynamic where Davis might feel like he's being held back unnecessarily. And honestly, can you blame him for feeling that way? The dude wants to play. He wants to be out there. He's watching his team lose every single night while he's stuck on the bench. And now there are reports floating around that Dallas might trade him anyway. That's got to be frustrating as hell. Do you guys remember Anthony Davis's first game for the Dallas Mavericks and how electric it was when he finally came back and showed the Mavericks who they got in return for Luka? There was a brief few quarters where it looked like Dallas may be trending towards competing for a championship. Until, of course, he started to deal with injuries. But at the same time, the Mavericks absolutely cannot let him come back too soon. Not after what happened to Tyrese Halliburton. Not with a 32-year-old who's already dealt with so many injuries throughout his career. The risk is just too high. Now, I want to zoom out for a second right now because Anthony Davis isn't the only player that's dealing with injury issues on the Dallas Mavericks. This isn't just one bad decision by Nico Harrison with Anthony Davis's calf strain. This is about a pattern of dysfunction that goes back for years. And when you look at the full timeline, it's actually kind of shocking that Harrison lasted as long as he did. So let's start with Casey Smith. Casey Smith was the Mavericks director of health and performance for 21 years. And after the 2023 season, Nico Harrison fired him. Now, why did Harrison fire a guy who'd been with the organization for over 2 decades? Well, according to sources, the reason centered on Smith being too negative, which people interpreted to mean that Smith wasn't enough of a yes man for Nico Harrison. He was telling Harrison things that Harrison didn't want to hear about player health and conditioning, so Harrison got rid of him. That's a massive red flag right there. When you fire your longtime medical director because he's too negative about injuries, that tells you everything you need to know about what kind of organization you're trying to run. You don't want people who are going to tell you the truth. You want people who are going to tell you what you want to hear. Then Harrison brings in his own guys. Keith Belton comes in as the athletic performance director, and according to ESPN's reporting, Belton and Joanne Billsborough clashed constantly. They had a heated confrontation over how to handle Derek Lively's ankle injury. Belton put Lively through an intense workout during his rehab and thought Lively could return to action in just a few days. But Billsborough wasn't sure, so he sent Lively for a CT scan, and guess what? The scan revealed a stress fracture in Lively's ankle that kept him out for 2.5 months. If Billsborough hadn't pushed for that CT scan, if they just listened to Belton and rushed Lively back, who knows what could have happened? Maybe Lively comes back too early, that stress fracture becomes a full break, and now you're looking at a serious injury for a promising young center. This is the stuff that was happening behind the scenes in Dallas. And the results? Only 3 players on the Mavericks played more than 57 games last season. Kyrie Irving's season ended with a torn ACL. Anthony Davis was immediately sidelined when he got to Dallas with that adductor strain. This year, same story. AD's played in 5 games. Lively's been hurt. The team is 3-9. You can't win in the NBA when your medical department is in complete chaos, especially when you have stars on your team that have a history of injuries. You can't keep players healthy when you're firing the guys they trust and bringing in yes men who are going to tell you what you want to hear instead of what you need to hear. And you definitely can't build trust with your roster when this is the kind of stuff that's going on behind the scenes. That's why firing Nico Harrison was the right move. Not just because of the Luka Doncic trade, though that alone would have been enough reason, but because the entire infrastructure he built around player health and performance was broken from day one. He fired people who knew what they were doing. He brought in his own guys who didn't work well together. And when the medical staff tried to do their jobs and protect players, he tried to overrule them just to protect his own job. So let's talk about what happens next, because at this point, it's so hard to see how this ends well for Anthony Davis and the Dallas Mavericks. The best case scenario is AD comes back fully healthy in the next couple of weeks, stays healthy for the rest of the season, and the Mavericks start playing better basketball. Maybe they make a little run, maybe they sneak into the playoffs, and Davis shows that when he's on the court, he can still be a dominant two-way force, and maybe that's enough to get a decent trade package if they decide to move him in the summer. But realistically, that's a lot of ifs. More likely, Davis comes back at some point soon, the Mavericks continue to struggle because they're just not talented enough, and every loss puts more pressure on the front office to make a trade. By the February deadline, Dallas is forced to move Davis for whatever they can get, just to start the rebuild around Cooper Flag properly. And here's the brutal truth that Dallas fans need to accept. Even if Anthony Davis stays healthy for the rest of the season, even if he puts up all NBA numbers and plays at an elite level, the damage is already done. He didn't want to leave LA in the first place. He got traded for a guy who's now leading the league in scoring for his old team. He's been injured for most of his time in Dallas, and the organization almost gambled with his entire career just to get a few wins. Why would Anthony Davis want to commit long-term to Dallas after all of that? Why would he want to sign an extension with a team that's treated him this way? And if he's not signing an extension, if he's not committing to being here long-term, and then what's the point of keeping him? You're just delaying the inevitable. So I think the most likely outcome is that Anthony Davis gets traded, but who would want Anthony Davis at this point? When he's healthy, he's one of the best players in the NBA, but the problem is he hasn't been healthy, and he has a gargantuan contract that goes into his mid-30s. The Dallas Mavericks situation just keeps getting worse. If we have another update on this, I'll make sure to bring it to you guys, even if it might be a little repetitive. If there's a good story, I'll always bring it to you guys. But let me know in the comment section down below what you guys think about all this. Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.